Florida State won't have a spring game this year, but why?
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith, longtime college football writer and analyst. Thank you for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. Today's show is going to discuss Florida State's future for 2025, the schedule. But first, we're going to have to talk about what's going on with the Noles in terms of spring ball and all the practice stuff that's happening. And we're also going to touch on some other teams that are struggling a little bit that are some rivals that probably won't bother too many Florida State fans. Let's talk about the spring game. Well, there's not going to be one. Why? Well, the main reason, at least the one that Florida State is spelling out, is that there's construction at the stadium, which is obviously true. Doak Campbell Stadium, I was in it a few months ago, was quite frankly in the middle of construction. It wasn't real easy for anybody to get around and do stuff. And obviously the stadium couldn't even be remotely close to capacity for any of the games this year. It's a long time to get all those things done. And they were due. I have no problem with that. But not having the spring game, they're saying it's because of the construction. Norvell has comments about it. You can read them online. But it's, unfortunate, this, that, and the other. Baloney. The main reason that it's not being played is they don't want film for other teams. And I'm totally cool with it. Could they have done it in another fashion, taken the game to Jacksonville or played it at one of the practice fields or something? They could have manipulated it. It really wouldn't have been that hard. Sometimes when there's a stadium under construction, a team will go to another site and they can still do something with recruiting in regards to that. Florida State doesn't want any part of it. If you think for 1 millisecond that not showing your new defense, your new special teams, and your new offense isn't a part of that, you are crazy. I've lost track of how many times I've had conversations with coaches about keeping film away from opponents, and it's a subject that is just hilarious to any of us that cover college football. And I know Malzahn, I don't know Norvell, but Malzahn doesn't like people being at practice either. It's very limited. You just see stretching and a couple of basic throws, and then you're gone. This is 100% about other teams not knowing what Florida State's going to run. Again, that is okay. A couple of points here. Number one, you're doing a full install with your offense and your defense, and I assume there'll be a few nuances with the special teams that are changed as well because there's such a big change in the roster. Florida State's adding 16 players, but I believe it's around 23 they've lost. So there's a lot of turnover. All three phases will go through it. But as Norvell rightfully said, the NCAA doesn't give you a ton of time in spring. 15 practices may sound like a lot, but when you're putting in an offense and a defense, they need conservatively 30. And I'm being kind. It's just not possible. So they'll do that 15th practice instead of it being a game or any kind of showcase, whatever you want to call it. It's going to be another practice, and they'll probably have some kind of game or whatever. I highly doubt there is much, if any, media availability for the last week of practice. They don't want anybody to see what they're doing. That's okay. The only thing that I ask out of that, and I'm sure Florida State's coaching staff would love this, is that you use the time as well as you can. Make sure that everything is ready to go to your ability so that this fall, when they play Alabama on August 30th, that's first game of the year in case you didn't remember, right there in Doak Campbell Stadium, that you are prepared and you have something to surprise them with. Especially with Malzahn and his history, it would be surprising to me if the Noles didn't have that opportunity because he's such a good play caller in big games. But at the same time, it's not like Alabama doesn't have a ton of talent. They obviously have more than Florida State. So utilize it to the best of your ability. And that goes for the other side of the ball too. You're switching from a 4-man to a 3-man line, at least predominantly. And you're also going to be changing how the linebackers play. And you got to figure out how Coach Coop, which he's joining the secondary now with Surtain. How do they mix? How do they want to align players? Who plays where in this new system where there's basically 3 safeties? So many things to answer on that side of the football as well. Hopefully that extra practice, while it seems minuscule, can just be for focusing on learning the task at hand, knowing the playbook and all that. But again, do not remotely buy that it's because of the stadium. You could have played it somewhere else. Other teams have done it. This is about not showing film, and that's okay. To that point, I want to just discuss a little bit of what's going on with Florida State's schedule in 2025. To me, it's a little bit more difficult than the one they just went through, to be honest. Here, I'm I'm not sure how anybody else would rank it, but this is my ranking. They've got 6 games that I think are tougher than the others, 2 or 3 of them in particular. They are at Clemson and at Florida. Obviously, rivals on the road is never easy. And again, they opened the season with Bama. Those 3 are the hardest 3 games. I don't think there's any doubt about it. I think Miami will be really good, but A, it's at home, and they don't have Cam Ward anymore. They don't have Xavier Restrepo and several other players. They lost some really good players. Miami will still be good, and they could make it to the playoff. Who knows? But Miami finds a way to screw up every year. So I don't think they're going to be on the same level as Bama, Clemson, or Florida. I think Miami will take a step back in that regard. NC State on the road, it's still a good defense. When they get things right, I think they'll make some adaptions, and they'll work it themselves out. But NC State's not as good as they used to be. The team that's sneaky that Florida State better not take for granted is Pittsburgh. So all of these different installations that Florida State's going through, just for those 6 games, they better be ready. Those are all teams that can win big. They've got coaches that have had a proven track record, made it the ACC title game or beat Florida State recently, whatever you want to say. The Noles had better be ready. The middle of the schedule, there's 4 games. They need to win at least 3 of these, and honestly, probably all 4. Virginia Tech, at Stanford, Wake Forest, and at Virginia. Those teams should not beat Florida State. Virginia Tech's got a quarterback. They give me some pause, but we'll see. East Texas A&M and Kent State, those got to be slaughters. Florida State needs to win those games 41-0. It's just reality. Florida State has a better football roster, and I don't care if they played all of their practices in front of everybody for those 2 teams. They should win. That's our X's and O's are pretty good, but more importantly, our Jimmys and Joes are way better than yours. That's just the reality of college football, and Bobby Bowden used to talk about it all the time. I always thought that I'd have a better chance of winning if I had better players than you. In other words, I'm going to out-recruit you, and he did. That's where it starts. Florida State is starting to build its roster through the portal again. They got a pretty good high school class, which, by the way, might have some news later today. Hopefully, Florida State adds another player in Sandman Thompson. We'll see if he picks the Noles. That'll be later tonight. But, again, Florida State's schedule, pretty daunting if you look at it from an on-the-road perspective. At NC State, at Clemson, at Florida, those are not easy. They also have to go all the way out to Stanford, which is just taxing on your body in general, having to fly to the West Coast and back. So there's going to be some interesting things in combination with the spring showcase. We're not going to get to see it because there isn't going to be one. So the next time you really see the Noles will be when the Alabama Crimson Tide come to Doak Campbell Stadium on August 30th later this year. When we come back, going to discuss how Alabama, ironically, among several other teams, have really lost a lot of depth, and they just don't have the same power they used to because of NIL and the transfer portal. That is next here on Locked on Seminoles. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing quite like giving your home a little tender, loving care. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get back into a routine. Whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your new space a new look to start the year, WayFair has everything you need, all within your budget. I'm obviously a guy that has different backgrounds and stuff that I've used here for Locked on Seminoles, and one of the things I'm looking for right now is some new furniture that I can sit some stuff on, especially a corner piece. I was on WayFair yesterday, and they have all kinds of different cabinets and tables that you can put in a corner. It's really cool, and they've got a ton of lighting, too. That's something else I'm looking for. So WayFair is certainly there for you. There's something for everybody, no matter what you're looking for. It doesn't be what I'm doing. They've got something for pillows, couches, chairs, anything you can imagine. They're going to have something for you. So give your home the refresh it needs with WayFair. Head to WayFair right now. That's wayfair.com. WayFair, every style, every home. Does it bother you that Florida State's going to be playing several teams that are losing key players? I'm guessing that it doesn't. Well, I went through some of the transfer portal retractions, if you will, from key opponents, Miami, Florida, Georgia, and Bama, just to give an example of how college football's playing field has leveled out, especially with teams either Florida State plays or recruits against or both. So here are a couple of things to note. For Miami, very talented tight end, Riley Williams. He's transferred back to the West Coast. He's from Portland, I believe. Originally, he's going to Oregon State. That was a guy that was going to be a key member of this next season's team, but he's just wants to get closer to family. So he's jettisoned out to the West Coast. Isaiah Horton, receiver, had a breakout season for Miami. He's transferring to Bama. Ironically, they're losing a key player, but unfortunately for the Noles, he's going to Bama. We'll see if he transitions well. Who knows what's going to happen with Bama's quarterback situation. We'll talk about that quite a few times. Key running back in terms of a slippery, make you miss guy that Miami's also losing. A little bit underrated, in my opinion, A.J. Allen. Most running back rooms, this is a kid that would play a lot. Miami's got a good running back room, but he's transferring out. They also lost Chris Johnson Jr. They've lost some key depth pieces there. For Florida, Miami, by the way, lost 16 players already. Florida is at 17 as of this recording. Defensive end in particular, they've lost like a half a dozen guys. Fewer just depth pieces, but three I noticed. TJ Searcy, Jake Pyburn, he's the guy going to LSU. Kelby Collins going to Bama. They've lost some key players there. I don't know what's going on with the defensive end room, but something's wrong with the coaching staff there. Somebody's mad, somebody's very unhappy, and it's spread throughout the room. You can't tell me otherwise. You're not going to lose that many guys. Florida still has other players, don't get me wrong, but that is bizarre. Florida should never be in a spot that they're in with defensive linemen, but hey, this is 2025, and NIL, the transfer portal, makes things wild. So I think that while Florida's going to take a major step up this next season, they might have an Achilles heel that either Florida State or any other team can attack. If you cannot protect the edges against the run game, and if you cannot get after the quarterback, especially if you have any injuries, that's going to hurt you. It's insane how many guys they've lost at this spot, and I'd love to know the backstory on that. I'll have to talk to Brandon Olson about it because there's got to be something. Moving to Georgia, this one is really wild. I didn't think that program was going to dip off, but the portal and NIL has killed Georgia compared to where it could be. Here are some of the players they've lost. Miami picked up Carson Beck. Is he going to be healthy? We'll see, but he's getting a lot of money, $3-4 million to go there, hang out in Miami. They also lost Damon Wilson, over 300 snaps this past year, an elite player from Venice, Florida, ironically. He's transferring to Mizzou. Jaden Rashada, backup quarterback. We don't know where he's going, but he's leaving Athens. Julian Humphrey, cornerback, who was a starter for much of this season, going to A&M. Jamal Garrett, backup defensive tackle, big body guy that can play nose guard. He's transferred to Southern Cal. Justin Rhett, a safety backup, transferred to Nebraska. Sam Mpimba, another defensive end, outside linebacker, going to play for the Aggies. And then Troy Bowles, a big-time linebacker recruit out of Tampa Jesuit a couple of years ago, was transferred to Michigan. All these guys that play depth, even if it's special teams, that's a big deal. You can't have a situation where you play as physical as Georgia does and then lose all your depth pieces. It changes how you practice. It changes what you call in the games, and it changes what teams have to prepare for. Their roster is nowhere near as deep as it used to be. Georgia's still good, but this is going to hurt them on the field, and it will help Florida State in regards to recruiting. Georgia's not Georgia anymore. They could still end up in the playoff next year. If I had to bet, I would say they would, but they could be 9-3 very easily. Maybe next year there's a 9-3 team that gets in as the 11 or 12 seed. Totally possible. Totally possible. But that team is going to walk into a game on the road, and it's also going to walk into a situation where they don't have the same depth. So any one position, they have a little bit of a run with injuries, Georgia could be in trouble. This is good for Florida State and pretty much anybody else not named Georgia because they are taking a step back. As for Bama, like Georgia has lost like 14 guys, some really good ones. Bama's lost 24 as of this recording. That is a lot. I know they still have a talented roster, but I'm a little concerned, especially in the trenches. Offensive lineman, Elijah Pritchett, a guy that started. He's going to Nebraska. Damon Payne, key defensive lineman. As a backup, he's transferring to Michigan. Devontae Smith, their starting nickel. Is going to Notre Dame, as if the Irish need more defensive backs, but he's going to Notre Dame. He's going closer to home to be close to his kid. He's from Cincinnati, but still, that's a tough loss. Justice Haynes, one of their top two running backs, he's transferring to Michigan. And then Jaheim Otis, another nose guard power player, he's transferring to Colorado to play with Deion Sanders. Look, this is not your Nick Saban variety of Bama moving forward. I think they're an 8-4 to 10-2 team moving forward. Prove me wrong. Just like Georgia, they're losing too many key players, but especially with them, it's more like my concern is in the trenches, and then losing Haynes is really tough. That's a good football player. So I'm not sure what's going to happen with Bama, but again, this is a microcosm of college football. The field has been leveled. in many different ways. Team like Missouri, who's gotten a few of these kids, like David Wilson's really good. He's going to Missouri. He could be all SEC next year and turn pro. Those kind of kids never ended up at Missouri before. It's just true. Maybe they're the darling next year in the SEC and they make it in. They're 10-2, sneak into the playoff. It's possible. Wouldn't be shocked. With that being stated, I still like to see some of these teams that were on top for so long come down. I just got tired of them. And I'm going to guess that a lot of Florida State fans feel the same way. One last note here about today's show in regards to the transfer portal. Remember, Florida State, just like every other program, they're finishing up the portal. There'll be some more guys come or go. But at the same time, you also have a spring transfer portal window. I think it's 10 days. It's right after spring ball. So anything that somebody misses now could absolutely add to their roster and get better in the spring. Or it could go the other way. Maybe Bama has a run and does really good. I don't know. Same thing with Florida State. They still could use some key players, another offensive lineman, another receiver, another linebacker, whatever it may be. You don't know exactly who's going to get in the portal because they go through spring ball, see where they stand. If they don't like their standing, these young men will take a new place somewhere else. Football is funny that way because it can look really good at any one point, and then it turns around and it's not the same. As for Florida State's detractions, like, again, they've had 23. They got a lot to prove. And I know that some of it had to be purged and all that. It's for the best, but it's still going to be a very, very important spring. That's one of the reasons probably Norvell's happy about not having the spring showcase. But I'm really curious to see how that goes, not only for the Noles, but these other teams too. It's going to be trying for a lot of the blue bloods, if you will, of college football. When we come back, got a little bit of recruiting news to discuss as we wrap up Locked On Seminoles. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That kind of stuff has happened to me multiple times, and it's nobody's fault but my own. Rocket Money can help you make sure you don't do that in the future, and that's why you need to give it a look. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps you find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitor spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, again, it's about not seeing something that I've had as a subscription that I didn't need. So for Rocket Money, it's their subscription tracker that is the best thing. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked-on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked-on, rocketmoney.com/locked-on. There's been quite a bit of recruiting movement in the last week or so with Florida State, and I got some good news here. This is from 24/7 Noles. It's a player that everybody wants to see do well this spring because he's got so much ability. He's got a lot of upside to him, and he's already ranked nationally. His name is Xavier Griffin, plays at Gainesville High School, just a little bit northeast of Atlanta. Elite recruit. He's technically committed to Southern Cal, but like the other kids from this area that committed early, I highly doubt they end up there, just my opinion. Florida State, Georgia, Tennessee, Bama, several other programs are still trying to get Griffin on campus for visits, and he will be at Florida State coming up very shortly for a junior day. This is the number 8 player overall by ESPN. He's in the top 79 by Rivals, ESPN, On3, and 24/7. Elite player. 6'3", 205 pounds, could play inside backer. He could be a rush guy, depending on how much weight he adds at some point, maybe a combo player. But it's important to get guys like this on campus all the time, as many times as you can. For Florida State to get back to being an elite program, we've talked about this a lot. No doubt about it, Florida is your number 1 hotbed to recruit. Georgia's number 2. Bowden made a living off getting kids like this, and there's no reason to believe that they won't be trying to do that more. They did a pretty good job this past year. Kevin Wynn in particular, Chroma, 2 of the top 5 players arguably in the state of Georgia, signed with Florida State even after a 2-10 season. So it shouldn't be that hard for Florida State to continue that as the program gets better. They're going to be in a bowl game this next year. I'm pretty confident of that now based on what they've done in the transfer portal and adding to the coaching staff. So that should help as well. Just keep in mind, as this junior day gets going this weekend, and they're going to have another one the week after that, these are really, really critical. Florida State has to win these battles and get guys on campus now so they can win them overall on signing day next December. The visits, the officials anyway, will be in May and June, but Florida State has to lay the groundwork now to make it happen. Thank you once again for making Locked On Seminoles your first listen each and every day. I truly appreciate you stopping in to talk some Noles with me. If you would, please hit that like button, that notification bell, and subscribe to this podcast and share it. I'd like to get in front of more Florida State fans. Thank you very much and have a good one.